You're 55 years old. Retirement is finally in sight. You've been saving for decades, maxing out your 401k, living below your means. You think you've done everything right. But here's the thing, nobody tells you. Most retirement failures don't happen because of obvious disasters like market crashes or medical emergencies. They happen because of invisible mistakes, subtle errors that compound silently until you're 78 and suddenly realizing the money won't last. These 7 mistakes are mathematical, psychological, and completely avoidable once you understand them. And here's where it gets interesting. Each one is more costly than the last. Let's pull back the curtain on what actually destroys retirement savings. The first mistake seems harmless, almost innocent. It's called lifestyle creep, and it happens when your spending quietly expands to match your retirement income. Most people assume their expenses will drop in retirement. No more commuting costs, no more work clothes, no more grabbing lunch near the office. But research shows that expenses often increase in the first 5 years of retirement, not decrease. Here's the psychological mechanism at work. You finally have time to enjoy life. You've been putting things off for decades, and now you can actually do them. So you justify more dinners out because you deserve it, more travel because you've earned it, more hobbies because why not? Each decision feels reasonable in isolation. But what actually happens is your withdrawal rate climbs from 4% to 6% without you noticing. Think about what that means mathematically. Let's say you retire with $800,000. At 4%, you're withdrawing $32,000 per year. But if lifestyle creep pushes you to 6%, you're now pulling out $48,000. That's an extra $16,000 annually. Here's where the math gets brutal. That extra $16,000 isn't just spending, it's compound growth you're stealing from your future self. Over 20 years, assuming a 7% return, that difference doesn't just cost you $320,000 in withdrawals. It costs you closer to $600,000 in lost portfolio growth. The way to avoid this is surprisingly simple, but requires discipline. Create a fun budget that's separate from essential expenses. Give yourself permission to enjoy retirement, but track it religiously for the first 3 years. Most people who control lifestyle creep in those early years never have a problem. Most people who don't end up wondering why their money disappeared faster than expected. Think about 2 retirees, both starting with identical $800,000 portfolios. Retiree A keeps withdrawals at 4% and adjusts for inflation. Retiree B lets lifestyle creep push withdrawals to 6%. After 15 years, retiree A still has over $700,000. Retiree B is down to $300,000 and starting to panic. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the next mistake makes this one even worse. Lifestyle creep might cost you a few $100,000 over retirement. This next mistake can cost you everything, and most people don't even know it exists until it's too late. It's called sequence of returns risk, and it's the retirement killer that nobody talks about when you're planning at 45. Here's the psychological trap. When you're working and contributing to your retirement accounts, the order of market returns doesn't matter much. A bad year followed by a good year averages out the same as a good year followed by a bad year. But the moment you start withdrawing money, everything changes. The order of returns becomes more important than the average return. Let me show you why this is terrifying. Imagine 2 people. Both retire on the same day with $1 million. Both experience the exact same market returns over 30 years, just in different orders. Person A hits a bear market immediately, losing 30% in year 1, then has strong returns afterward. Person B has strong returns early, then hits the bear market later. Here's what actually happens. Person A is forced to sell shares when prices are down 30% to cover living expenses. They're withdrawing from a smaller base that now has to work harder to recover. By year 20, Person A has run out of money completely. Person B, who had the exact same average returns, still has over $400,000 left. Same returns. Different order. One person is broke, the other is fine. The reason this destroys retirements is mathematical. When you withdraw money during a market crash, you're selling more shares to get the same dollar amount. Those shares are gone forever. They can't participate in the recovery. It's like cutting down a tree right before it's about to grow, then wondering why your forest is smaller. The first 5 years of retirement are everything. If you can avoid selling stocks during a crash in those critical early years, your odds of success skyrocket. If you get unlucky and retire right before a bear market, you're in serious trouble unless you have a plan. Here's how to protect yourself. Keep 2 to 3 years of living expenses in cash or short-term bonds. That way, when the market crashes, you're not forced to sell stocks at the worst possible time. You live off your cash bucket while your stock portfolio recovers. The other strategy is dynamic spending. In years when the market is down, you cut your spending by 10 to 15%. Skip the expensive vacation. Delay replacing the car. These small adjustments in bad years can add 5 to 10 years to your portfolio's life. Think about it this way. The universe is playing a cruel joke where the timing of your retirement party determines whether you're comfortable at 85 or eating ramen. Sequence of returns risk is that powerful, and most people planning retirement have never even heard of it. But as expensive as sequence risk is, this next mistake costs even more because it's guaranteed to happen. Healthcare is the silent retirement assassin that nobody prices correctly when they're planning at 40. The psychological mechanism here is brutal. When you're healthy, it's nearly impossible to imagine spending $5,000 a month on medical expenses 30 years from now. But here's the reality that'll blow your mind. The average retired couple needs roughly $300,000 just for Medicare premiums, deductibles, and copays, and that number doesn't include long-term care, which we'll get to later. It also doesn't include dental, vision, or hearing aids, which Medicare barely covers. Most people assume Medicare is free healthcare for seniors. It's not. Medicare Part B costs about $170 per month per person. Part D prescription coverage is another $30 to $50. Medigap supplemental insurance to cover what Medicare doesn't pay runs another $150 to $300 monthly. Before you've had a single doctor's appointment, you're spending $400 to $500 per person per month just on insurance premiums. Then comes the actual healthcare, copays for specialists, deductibles that reset every year, prescription costs that climb as you age, physical therapy, medical equipment. The expenses compound as your body ages, which is exactly when your portfolio needs to last the longest. Here's where people get the math catastrophically wrong. They budget for healthcare inflation at the general inflation rate of 3%. But healthcare costs have historically increased at 6% annually, double the rate of everything else. That means healthcare expenses double every 12 years, not every 24 years, like other costs. Let's run the real numbers. A 65-year-old couple budgeting $4,000 annually for healthcare costs might think they're being conservative. But at 6% healthcare inflation, by age 75, they need $7,000 annually. By 85, they need $13,000. By 95, they need $23,000 per year just for routine healthcare. The way to fix this is to build a separate healthcare fund starting in your 40s. If you have a high-deductible health plan, max out your health savings account every single year. HSAs are triple tax-advantaged. Contributions are tax-deductible, growth is tax-free, and withdrawals for medical expenses are tax-free. Someone who contributes $300 monthly to an HSA from age 40 to 65, assuming 7% returns, ends up with roughly $140,000. That's a dedicated healthcare fund that can absorb the inevitable medical expenses without touching your main retirement portfolio. But even healthcare costs pale in comparison to what's coming next. All right, so we've covered lifestyle creep, sequence of returns risk, and healthcare costs, each one more expensive than the last. But this next mistake, this is where the government shows up to take their cut, and most people never see it coming until they're already underwater. It's called the tax torpedo, and it can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in retirement if you don't plan for it. Here's the psychological trap. Most people think taxes go down in retirement because their income goes down. That's not how it works. Every dollar sitting in your traditional 401k or IRA is not actually yours. It's a partnership with the IRS where they own 20 to 30% depending on your tax bracket. But here's what people don't understand. You don't get to choose when to pay those taxes. The government chooses for you. At age 73, required minimum distributions kick in. The IRS forces you to start withdrawing money from your tax-deferred accounts whether you need it or not. And those withdrawals count as ordinary income, which means they're taxed at your full marginal rate. Let's run the real math. Someone with $1 million in a traditional IRA at age 73 has to withdraw roughly $37,000 that first year. That's taxable income on top of Social Security benefits. If you're married and taking Social Security, you might already have $40,000 in benefits. Now add the $37,000 RMD, and you're at $77,000 in income. But here's where the torpedo hits. Up to 85% of your Social Security becomes taxable once your income crosses certain thresholds. So now you're paying taxes on income you thought was tax-free. Your effective tax rate just jumped, and you didn't even realize you were in the blast radius. And it gets worse. High income in retirement triggers something called RMA, which is the income-related monthly adjustment amount for Medicare. Cross certain income thresholds and your Medicare premiums can double or triple. You're now paying hundreds of dollars more per month just because your RMD pushed you over the line. The way to defuse this bomb is Roth conversions in your 50s and early 60s, before Social Security starts and before RMDs kick in. You strategically convert money from your traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, paying taxes now at lower rates to avoid paying higher taxes later. Here's a real scenario. Someone retires at 62 with $800,000 in a traditional IRA. They don't start Social Security until 70. For those 8 years, they have low taxable income, so they can convert $50,000 per year from traditional to Roth at the 12% federal bracket. Total tax cost over 8 years, $48,000. But if they don't do conversions and wait until RMDs start at 73, they'll be forced to withdraw from a much larger balance at the 22 or 24% bracket, potentially paying double the taxes. Over a 30-year retirement, strategic Roth conversions can save you well over $100,000 in taxes. The tax torpedo is guaranteed to hit if you have most of your money in tax-deferred accounts. The only question is whether you see it coming and plan accordingly, or whether it blindsides you when you're 75 and can't do anything about it. But as brutal as taxes are, this next mistake might be even more expensive because it's a permanent decision you can't undo. This is the mistake that can cost you close to $500,000 over a long retirement, and it's entirely based on fear and impatience. The decision: when to start taking Social Security benefits. You can claim as early as 62 or delay until 70. Most people claim at 62 because they see it as free money they should grab immediately. But here's what they're missing. Social Security isn't just income, it's longevity insurance that pays more the longer you wait. The math will blow your mind. If your full retirement age benefit is $2,000 per month, claiming at 62 gets you only $1,400. But waiting until 70 gets you $2,480. That's a 76% increase in monthly income for life. Let's calculate what this actually means. Over a 30-year retirement, claiming at 62 gives you roughly $504,000 in total benefits. Waiting until 70 gives you roughly $893,000. That's a difference of $389,000. But people don't think this way. They think the government might run out of money, or they won't live long enough to make delaying worth it. The break-even point is around age 80. If you live past 80, which is increasingly common, you come out massively ahead by waiting. Here's the strategy that makes this work. Use your retirement accounts to bridge the gap from 62 to 70. Live off your IRA or 401k for those 8 years. Then let Social Security become your inflation-adjusted pension that you can never outlive. For married couples, this gets even more important. The higher earner should absolutely delay to 70, because when one spouse dies, the surviving spouse keeps the larger benefit. If the higher earner claimed early, the widow or widower is stuck with a permanently reduced benefit for the rest of their life. The choice is yours. Grab the smaller check now out of fear, or be strategic and lock in 76% more income for life. So, we've covered 5 expensive mistakes, each one bigger than the last. But this next one, it's counterintuitive, and it destroys retirements because people think they're being responsible. It's the mistake of being too conservative with your investments in retirement. People think moving everything to bonds and cash is the safe play. It's not. It actually increases your risk of running out of money. Here's the psychological trap. You're 65 years old. You've spent decades building this nest egg. The thought of losing 30% in a market crash feels terrifying. So you move everything to bonds earning 3% because it feels safe. But here's what you're missing. You potentially have 30 years ahead of you. That's longer than most people's working careers. The old rule that you should be mostly in bonds by retirement made sense when people lived to 75. But if you're retiring at 65 and living to 95, you need growth. Bonds and cash get destroyed by inflation over 3 decades. Let me show you the math. If you're in all bonds earning 3%, but inflation runs at 3%, your real return is 0. You're treading water while your purchasing power slowly drowns. Meanwhile, stocks historically return 7% after inflation, meaning your money doubles in real purchasing power every 10 years. Here's a real scenario. A $1 million portfolio in 100% bonds, earning 3% with 4% annual withdrawals, runs out of money by year 23. Same portfolio with 60% stocks and 40% bonds historically lasts beyond year 35 and leaves money for heirs. The longevity risk is real. Even at 85, you might live another 10 to 15 years. Stocks are still your best defense against inflation eating your purchasing power. The strategy that works: start retirement at 60 to 70% stocks, gradually reducing to 50% stocks by your 80s. Keep 2 to 3 years of spending in cash and bonds so you never have to sell stocks during a crash. Let the rest grow. Being too conservative in retirement is like wearing a helmet while sitting on your couch because you're afraid of falling. Meanwhile, your house is slowly sinking into the ground. The thing you're protecting yourself from isn't the real danger. But this final mistake, it's the one that combines all the others into a guaranteed disaster. And now we've reached the most expensive mistake of all. It's not a specific financial error. It's the absence of a plan entirely. Most people approach retirement with what I call the hope strategy. They hope their savings will be enough. They hope they won't get sick. They hope the market will cooperate. They hope their kids won't need financial help. Hope is not a strategy. Here's what having no plan actually means. You're making all the mistakes we just covered simultaneously. You're letting lifestyle creep happen because you're not tracking it. You're exposed to sequence of returns risk because you don't have a cash buffer. You're getting destroyed by healthcare costs because you never built a separate fund. You're paying maximum taxes because you never did Roth conversions. You claimed Social Security early because you didn't understand the math. You're too conservative with investments because fear is driving decisions. And you're watching it all unfold in real time with no idea how to fix it. The cost of having no plan isn't just financial, it's psychological. It's lying awake at 3 in the morning wondering if the money will last. It's every market dip feeling like a personal catastrophe. It's being 78 and realizing you might have to move in with your kids. The alternative is simple but requires action now. Build a written retirement plan that addresses every mistake we covered. Know your withdrawal strategy. Have your tax plan. Understand your Social Security timing. Create healthcare and emergency buffers. Rebalance your portfolio intentionally, not emotionally. The difference between someone with a plan and someone without one isn't just hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's the difference between confidence and anxiety for 30 years. If you want to learn the 5 types of people who should not retire early, watch this next video.